You rise to the level of the highest standards placed on you. This is an interesting concept I came across when I was listening to a Mark Mason episode of the Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck podcast with Cody Sanchez, where she actually said it the way it is, that you rise to the level of the highest standards placed on you. And I thought, wow, what an interesting philosophy to have. The fact that you grow based on the level of standards, benchmarks, and goals placed on you, be it by you or by the environment around you, completely holds ground. Just think about it. People that set low goals and have low expectations of their lives hardly go on to achieve much, while men and women that dream of reaching the moon, of curing cancer and solving world hunger, these are the guys that are out there pushing the limits of what us as human beings can do. So in this episode, join me as we take a look at this concept and play around with a few lessons that I think we can apply to our 9 to 5 or 5 to 9 hours. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the 5 to 9 Job. I am your host Raymond, and today we are unpacking a powerful concept that simply states that you rise to the level of the highest standards placed on you. Let me give you an example to illustrate this. There is a British gentleman known as Roger Bannister. You may or may not have heard of his story, but this was a gentleman in the 1950s. To be particular, 1954, broke the 4-minute mile record. So just a background, before 1954, there was this standard, there was this benchmark and belief among the experts and athletes that it was impossible to run 1 mile in under 4 minutes. So just to put it into context, 1 mile is about 1,609 meters. That's like running 100 meters 16 times in under 4 minutes. It's huge just even thinking about it, but this gentleman was able to prove people wrong and set a new standard, because on May the 6th, 1954, together with his friends, or together with the help of his friends, he was able to run a mile in just under 3 minutes and 59.4 seconds. He barely made it there, but he broke this perception that you couldn't do it, and simply by setting that standard for himself and for others. Just 46 days later, another gentleman by the name of John Landy from Australia was able to run it in 3 minutes and 58 seconds, just 1.4 seconds better, but nevertheless a new world record. And actually since then and to date, hundreds of people have been able to run the 4-minute mile. Why? Because Roger Bannister set that standard. He set that benchmark that, you know what, this could be done. And he shifted the mentality, the mental barriers, and showed the world that humans have the potential, and actually inspired others to accomplish what was once deemed impossible. So what am I saying when I talk about standards? The major things that come to mind personally are 3 things, and I have to caveat this by saying I believe in high standards, so you won't see me trying to downplay it. But I believe that 1, you need to know who and where your standards are coming from, who places the standards on you, and how you decide which standards to live by, because you have to get that sweet spot between having very high standards or very low standards. And then thirdly, what happens when these standards around you are low or even worse, what to do in such a situation. And maybe just to put it simply, standards could also be interpreted as expectations, because we all respond to expectations or standards that are placed on us. We adapt to what is required and to what is expected. If the bar is set low, we kind of try to settle for the minimum, but if the bar is set high, you see yourself pushing, you strive and you grow to meet that standard. It is that pressure of a standard that actually allows us to rise and to grow. So imagine people like Michael Jordan and Serena Williams, or even Messi and Ronaldo. These are people who rose to the level of extreme standards that were placed on them, often by themselves, yes, but also by mentors, by coaches, and actually also by fans in one way or the other. They understood that to play at an elite level, they couldn't just meet the bar. They had to actually set the bar, Their entire environment demanded excellence, and they rose to that challenge every day. And guess what? Now we know their names. They inspire us. They have world records. They have trophies. They have lots of money as well. But that simply came from the standards that they set for themselves and the kind of environment they were in. So you need to understand who places these standards on you, and in which kind of scenarios you need to impose standards for yourself, on yourself. You see, if I am in an environment that has low standards, it is up to me to either set the bar high for myself or to leave that environment and look for somewhere that will push me to rise. Because when you settle for low standards, you settle for mediocrity, you settle for you become stagnant. And the same applies to when you are in an environment that expects very high standards, yes, but abnormally high standards. Then there you have to gauge and say, okay, you know what? Where are these expectations coming from? Is it something that I am imposing on myself, or is it because of this community? Is it affecting me negatively, or is it pushing me? Am I being lazy, or should I tone it down? You need to know where the standards come from in any part of your life, be it your career, be it in family and in relationships. There is always a standard. Subconsciously there is standard, and that's where the second point comes in. How do you decide what standards to live by? You see, if you want to be extraordinary, it just automatically comes by default that you have to live up to high standards. If you want to be a good husband, you're going to have to live up to high standards. If you want to be the CEO of the company that you are working at right now, you are going to have to set high standards for yourself. You're going to need those standards so that you can stand out. Okay, that's more of a repetition, but yes, you get the point. For you to stand out, you're going to need to outshine people. You're going to need to perform better than others. You're going to need to show people around you that you can set the bar and you can meet the bar. But if you want to have a walk in the park, I don't know, you could set low standards, you could have less frequent goals, but I'm not going to go into that. And then thirdly, what happens when the standards around us are low or worse, or actually non-existent, when the environment you are in doesn't set the standards, doesn't set the expectations? You are in a workplace whereby you are given a task, but you are not given deadlines, you are not given guidance, you are not given anything, you are not helped or facilitated to do your work. What happens when the standards around us are non-existent? What happens when the standards around us are low? My advice, you either have to take initiative and create the standards for yourself, or you need to find an environment that supports your growth and pushes you and allows you to be able to meet your goals and targets, career-wise, relationship-wise. Now, I'm not saying leave your relationship, but I mean it might be something you need to talk to or talk about with your spouse, with your manager, and then look at where the conversation goes. If you see that your goals are being disrespected, or you are being disrespected in that case, you might need to think of changing environment. And that's what I want to talk about actually. You cannot do it alone, and in most cases the biggest influence comes from your environment, because your environment sets the bar and sets the space in which you are going to adapt to. If you surround yourself, for example, with people that do not push, people who accept the bare minimum, people who allow for excuses, who slack off and do not deliver on timelines, then guess what? You are likely going to settle into that groove as well. But if you place yourself in a setting that demands discipline, that demands accountability, that demands resilience, responsibility, that is when you will start to see a different version of yourself. This is actually why athletes train with top tier coaches. Entrepreneurs gather at elite masterminds, and ambitious minds seek those challenging conversations. They actively put themselves in environments that demand excellence, that demand something more. And sometimes these environments are a bit uncomfortable. They stretch you. Sometimes they are painful. You have to sacrifice a lot. But the thing is, comfort never leads to growth. If you truly want growth, if you want true growth, it lives at the edge of discomfort. And look, I'm not saying you have to go all out. There is an optimum here. And I'm not saying push yourself into burnout. I'm saying find the environment that demands the best in a healthy and sustainable way. Healthy and sustainable. That is where that elevation will come to you, whereby you are pushing yourself just enough to be uncomfortable and to grow, but you are not damaging your mental health, you're not damaging your physical health and all that. Where the challenge is, and what I am starting to see, is that there is a culture today that almost rewards trying. The participation medal thing, the everyone is a winner mentality, that group recognition, and then also seeing undeserving people win with no effort or free passes, and portraying the hustle and the hustling as toxic and out of balance with life purpose. It has come to a point that we are afraid to demand things from people. Bosses are afraid to delegate tasks to their employees because the employee looks, overwhelmed. And yet statistically, from the same episode with Cody Sanchez and Mark Mason, we are doing less and less. Statistically, we are doing less and less, but we are afraid to demand things from people, to ask of high standards. People are becoming more and more scared to push because they do not want to hurt others' feelings. They do not want to seem too harsh or unrealistic. I do get that balance is important, and I 100% back mental health. Mental health is important. Burnout is real, but you need to realize that if you aren't growing, you are moving backwards, simply because the world around you keeps moving. Growth requires a challenge, and if we have created a culture where any challenge is seen as too much, we are setting ourselves up for mediocrity. We are avoiding the very environments that have the potential to bring out the best. You are not going to see your true potential if no one pushes you, and if you are not willing to push yourself. Just think about it this way. When you go to the gym, you lift weights that are heavy. You push past what is comfortable, because that's how you build the muscle. Life operates in the same principle. Without standards that stretch us, we do not grow. So anyway, let me use another analogy, or maybe just another example, comparing this with the 9 to 5 hours, the job hours, and then the 5 to 9, that is after work and before work, because I think this really illustrates the difference. You see, during our 9 to 5 or at your job, you might have certain tasks and deadlines that are placed on you, but most often they are set by someone else. It could be your boss, it could be your company or your team, and sometimes we adopt to these standards, especially if they are low or mediocre, and we start to just give enough to get by. We meet the minimum, we do what is required, and that is it. That is what we are getting paid for anyway. You'll see people not give an extra push, not do that extra work, and there is no overtime pay in most companies. But then when it comes to your 5 to 9 hours, I would want to say you cannot settle. This is your own time during your passion projects, during your side hustle, or even your personal growth. That is where you are setting your own standards and have the power to push yourself to the next level. No one else is placing those standards on you. And if you want to or are going to achieve something extraordinary, like I said, you're going to have to set high standards. You're going to have to set high standards in that time. Just think about it. If you are only giving yourself the same standard in your personal time as you do at your job, then how are you growing? How are you going to take yourself to the next level? The 5 to 9 hours, unfortunately, requires more discipline. They require more focus and, yes, higher standards, because that's the time that directly impacts your future. So let me end this by saying, do not be afraid to demand more of yourself, to push into uncomfortable spaces, to find that environment that stretches you. Your highest potential usually lies beyond your comfort zone. So seek out people who challenge you and spend more time in environments that demand the best of you. It's the standards that you hold yourself to that will define your success. So thank you for tuning in. And if you found value in this episode, do not keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, who needs a reminder to raise their standards and keep them high, keep their environment good. And until next time, keep striving and keep reaching for those higher standards. See you in the next episode.